There are a few things in life that are truly terrifying. And some of us don't get quite as spooked as others. But if you're staying in a place that you just know is definitely haunted, and if you're like me, you just lie awake at night, there's nothing quite like the feeling of just laying there, truly wishing that the morning would just come around, because you keep just hearing little pops and clicks and movements and shuffling sounds, but you're in an unfamiliar place, so you don't really know what kind of sounds to expect. And maybe you're there with your significant other who is over there, luckily, effortlessly sleeping, but you just get this feeling that the two of you are not the only ones in the room. You're not exactly sure what happened in the place that you're staying, but you also get the feeling that it is not good. It's also a little strange when the place you're staying is a little off the beaten path. There's a sense of seclusion that sets in, and sometimes that feeling can make us feel a little trapped. When you've gone out of your way to go somewhere and you've paid money to stay in a specific location, you feel a sense of obligation to stay there, even if you're starting to feel like the place is a little off. Well, one of the places we'll be talking about today is very much like that. It's beautiful, it's old, it's secluded, and some of the people that have worked there say that there have been multiple guests that have fled with their bags in the middle of the night because of what they saw in their rooms. Some heard voices, some saw objects move on their own, and some unlucky guests woke up to see someone they didn't know standing in their room, watching them sleep and smiling at them. The Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest in the world, and we just happen to live in them. One thing we can tell you, there are ghosts in the mountains. Greetings and welcome to another episode of Ghosts in the Mountains. I am your host, Caleb Hanks, and I am here with Austin the Burglar Burgess, and he is the burglar of knowledge. He will steal it straight from your brain. Austin Burglar Burgess, how are you tonight, buddy?
Yeah, you know, besides the layer of pollen that's kind of attacking my sinuses right now, I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
Dude, between the wildfires and the pollen, I'm surprised we can even breathe and speak right now.
Right.
The wildfires, for the most part, have kind of made their way out of here, but I think last episode, it was getting pretty dicey.
Yeah, we had some of that in our throats.
But now the mystical realm of pollen is upon us, and if we're coughing up a lung tonight, well, sorry, there's not really a lot we can do about it. But I'm always excited to do this podcast. It doesn't really matter what we're talking about. But tonight I'm really, really, really excited about the episode that we're doing, because the subject matter for tonight's episode is literally one of my favorite places on the entire planet. And if you have been listening to this podcast, Ghost in the Mountains, you can also find us at ghostinthemountains.com and all of your typical podcast providers. If you've listened to our previous episodes, I believe it was episode number 3. That was our Chimney Rock episode. And we said when we were doing that one that we were going to do eventually a follow-up episode about a little place right down the road from Chimney Rock. And that is a place called Lake Lure, North Carolina. And I have spent a lot of time down there personally. Like I said, it's legitimately one of my favorite places to go. I like to just go down there and relax and be at peace. However, every time that I've gone down there, I always find myself on some dock of some Airbnb in the middle of the night, having a drink. But I have always had this feeling that it was just a little creepy down there, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the humidity from the lake, but the air is just a little heavier down there.
Something in the air that you could feel.
Yeah, there's something in the air. Phil Collins would love it there. And it's very strange when I think about what I know about Lake Lure now, because I always kind of just suspected, there's just certain places that feel a little bit weird. And that was opened up quite a bit when we talked about everything that had been reported to have happened at Chimney Rock. We won't go too terribly much into it because, we've got a whole episode on the Chimney Rock area. But Chimney Rock is a stone's throw from Lake Lure. They're essentially, right next to each other.
Yeah, the history of the two are very much entwined.
Yeah, and there's a boatload of very weird stuff that has been going on for a very long time at Chimney Rock. And it just so happens that when we said we were going to do an episode about Lake Lure, I was thinking, I know that there are definitely some reported hauntings in that area, but boy, did I really not realize how haunted, reportedly, the Lake Lure area is, because I feel like when we started diving into this, it was like...
It's a hotbed.
It's a hotbed, dude. There's like so many reports.
Yeah, for sure. I think when we recorded the Chimney Rock episode, the area, Lake Lure and surrounding area itself was still pretty affected by the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. And I'm not saying that it still isn't. I'm sure that they are still in recovery mode down there, but I do know the town of Lake Lure, the community is open. And from what I understand, Chimney Rock State Park is scheduled to reopen here pretty soon as well.
And I cannot tell you how exciting that news is, because that community all but got wiped off the map during Hurricane Helene. I mean, it was truly heartbreaking to witness.
Yeah, and another reason we did want to circle back to draw attention to this area now that the community is open again. But on top of that, as we mentioned, these fires that had been happening over the past few weeks, Rutherford County was definitely part of that area that was affected by the fires, and it really wasn't that far away from Lake Lure Chimney Rock. So again, anything we can do to throw some support that community's way, we're totally on board for.
Part of what we're wanting to try to do as part of our investigation is just to try to give back to that community a little bit and go spend some money down that way and go support some local businesses in the whole 9 yards while we're down there. So if you're unfamiliar with Lake Lure or you're unfamiliar with the inn, why of all places in Western North Carolina does this, have a ton of really weird stuff happening? This whole area. And like Austin and I were talking a little bit before the podcast, and I was saying, I don't always jump to the theory of like, it's a big paranormal vortex. I don't just right off the bat go, that's probably what's going on. But with everything that has been reported at Chimney Rock, and then the ongoing strangeness that is seemingly still going on to this day around Lake Lure, it does kind of make you wonder.
Definitely does.
So let's start from the beginning like we typically do. Let's learn a little bit about, what is this place? How did this all come to be? How did this lake spring up in the middle of the mountains, Austin?
So the history of Lake Lure actually starts back with our boy, Dr. Lucius B. Morse, who was mentioned in the Chimney Rock episode.
Dude, when you said our boy, I was like, if you say Joshua P. Warren...
Founded by, just kidding. No, so if you don't remember that episode or haven't listened to it, Dr. Morse was actually a tourist visiting the Western North Carolina area in search of this healing climate to cure his tuberculosis that we hear so much about. I think that's pretty common theme amongst people traveling to the area, especially in that time frame. But Dr. Morse fell in love with the Chimney Rock area during his visit, and he actually purchased the land that the infamous monolith is located on in 1902. So Morse and his family were the ones that eventually turned the area into Chimney Rock Park, built an elevator to access the top of the rock, and kind of, brought more public attention and awareness to that area itself. But in order to power all this and bring power to the elevator, of course, Morse created the Carolina Mountain Power Company and began construction on a dam of the Broad River, just the Broad River, not the French Broad, which would lead to the creation or impoundment of Lake Lure, which was actually named by Morse's wife, Elizabeth. So back in the day, the town of Buffalo was a small farming and mining community of about 150 people. And this town is located presently underneath Lake Lure. It was nestled in what was then called the Whiteside Valley, and it sat on the banks of the Broad River. So when Morse and his family built this dam and created Lake Lure, the town of Buffalo was submerged onto the water in the process of this. And that kind of led to part of the hidden landscape of the lake, per se.
And the creepiness.
Definitely a little bit for sure. Anytime you're dealing with submerged towns, there's always got to be some sort of imprint or memories sticking there, I would say. But
yeah, I mean, just like even if nobody actually died in the creation of it in general, it's just weird if there's a town under a lake. It's just creepy.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the town's buildings were moved before the flood, but this is, from what I understand, pre-Helene. So who knows with all the debris that got flooded into that lake, anything from the town of Buffalo is still standing. I don't really know. But pre-Helene, the schoolhouse and a few other buildings were left submerged beneath the lake. A legend had it that if you were to take your boat out to the center of Lake Lure and look straight down into the water, you could actually still make out the faint outlines of some of these submerged buildings, and particularly the steeple of the church. It's kind of the most infamous thing that a lot of people reported seeing.
Yeah, I've actually had a birthday party in the middle of Lake Lure on a pontoon boat.
Oh, no joke.
And the water is pretty murky, so I would assume if you are able to see the top of that church, that it's probably like when the sun is at a particular angle that you might be able to see that. I personally,
that would make sense.
I've never seen it, but I also wasn't really looking for it.
Yeah, and again, who knows if that sustained any damage during the debris flood that came in during Helene. But allegedly, this was a kind of a popular thing for tourists to do, to kind of boat out to the middle of the lake and try to spot some of these submerged buildings. But to go along with that, the citizens of Buffalo at the time obviously did not want the graves of their loved ones to be submerged under the water. So most of the graves in town were relocated to what is known as the Buffalo Cemetery, and that's actually located in the Rumbling Bald area of Lake Lure.
And that was their first mistake.
Yeah. I mean, I think disturbing graves in any capacity, regardless of your intent, probably isn't a good idea.
Yeah, that's a very common thing. It happens all the time, but it always, at least in the back of my mind, it's like, oh boy.
Yeah, and I mean, from what I could tell, I've never been to this Rumbling Bald area or spent a lot of time in the Lake Lure side of there, but from what I understand, this is still, the Buffalo Cemetery, something that you could actually hike to and see yourself. From what I understand, I think a lot of the gravestones are faded or unmarked at this time, but it is still standing in that area.
Yeah, my exit strategy when I finally do retire, I'll probably never retire from talking about weird stuff, but I'd always planned to open up a bowling alley over at the Rumbling Bald Resort and call it the Rumbling Balls Resort.
That's such a good idea.
I mean, I don't know where the closest bowling alley to Lake Lure is, but I think they might need one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, bowling alleys are, not as popular as they once were, I'd say.
Yeah.
I think there's a few that have closed down in Western North Carolina over the past few years. So who's to say that while you're on vacation in Lake Lure, that wouldn't be a great pastime?
I'm bringing bowling back.
There you go.
The Rumbling Balls.
So when Lucius Moore dammed the Broad River to create Lake Lure, the snakes that existed within the town of Buffalo in this valley were desperately scrambling for a safe haven, and they ended up retreating to an island in the middle of the lake that was referred to as Yacht Island. I think we touched on this a little bit in the Chimney Rock episode.
Oh, we definitely did. I tell a longer version of an odd synchronicity where I was hanging out at Lake Lure with some friends, and I was just being silly, and I rolled out to this area. There's just this little raised piece of land, but I called this little area Rattlesnake Island, and then I found there's Yacht Island in the middle of Lake Lure proper, and I started calling that Rattlesnake Island 2.0. When we start looking into this stuff, I find out that this thing had actually been called Snake Island. And I was truly blown away by just how oddly specific that was. I've never seen a snake there or anything,
Well, a little bit more on that, but who knows? Maybe you're tapping into something there.
Potentially so. But it's not only known as Snake Island, is it, Austin?
Correct. So initially, as we mentioned, Morse referred to this as Yacht Island. He had big plans for this. He envisioned this as the site of this big luxury yacht club with upscale homes, and it was going to be part of this big mountain resort that he'd planned to build around the lake. But there was one problem. The snakes didn't really fit the vibe that Morse was going for, and that area eventually became known as Snake Island. And word had it that Morse even offered $500 to anyone who would be able to come get rid of the snakes from that island. So eventually, one local farmer had an idea. He loaded up a boat with a bunch of his pigs, rowed over to Snake Island, and let the pigs loose. The pigs were hungry and ready and basically went to town on the snakes over the next few months. And a few months later, the island was allegedly cleared of snakes, and the pigs had earned Snake Island a new nickname, Pig Island.
The weird thing to me about the other weird thing to me about the stack of other weird things about yacht/snake/pig island is I have never heard of a pig eating a snake ever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's such, I mean, I guess it's, you have heard the idea of like, pigs will kind of eat anything.
Yep.
But it's just like, obviously this dude knew that and it was an effective method, but that's just kind of the last thing I would think is like, let's take a bunch of pigs over to fight the snakes. It's so weird.
Well, it's like if there's nothing else on the island, like, you got to eat something, right?
Yes, they'll eat the snakes.
Yeah. I do think that it's pretty interesting with the idea of these snakes traveling to this island, because I think we did touch on the idea of there being a lake lure monster in the Chimney Rock episode, just a little bit there, which, I think we have our own opinions on, with this being obviously a man-made lake. Did Dr. Morse just throw a monster in there? I don't know.
Yeah, I believe the story was that the origin of the lake monster theory was when there was the mass exodus of snakes, that they would see all this movement in the water and some of them would be moving together, and it kind of spawned this, local lore about there being a lake monster. But yeah, we were kind of laughing a little bit on the Chimney Rock episode of like, there was a man-made lake, and they found the monster later and they released him in there.
But I mean, to their credit, like, if I had never seen something like that, and I see this serpent-like figure of a group of snakes kind of traveling, swimming through the lake, I'd be pretty freaked out too.
Well, I mean, to think on it a little bit, what if the lake monster actually was a giant serpent that just happened to be living there in the mountains that then essentially was just like, okay, there's a lake here now, and this is where I live.
Hey, valid.
Austin, I'm sure you probably are, but, you being a fellow cryptid fan as I am, I'm sure you've seen that image of the traveler that was flying over, I think, somewhere in the Congo or the Amazon, and it was that massive, I guess, anaconda. And they still to this day are trying to figure out what the deal is with that thing. But from the vantage point of where they took the picture from the plane, this thing was freaking huge. So if you look at it kind of from that, it's like, okay, could there potentially be some like behemoth snake somewhere in the mountains that just ends up being aquatic? I don't know, man. I mean, if you look at it from that angle,
yeah,
potentially so. Now, I will say I have lived in Western North Carolina for a very long time, as have Austin, and probably the biggest snake I've ever seen was just a black snake. And he was a pretty big guy. I think he was probably like a 6-footer. But even rattlesnakes don't get super, super big, so I would dare say there's probably not a lot of a chance that that's a thing. But fun to think about.
I guess. I think it's fairly well documented on this podcast that I'm terrified of snakes, so not a topic I often think about.
Yeah, I totally hear you there, buddy.
So jumping back into some of the history here, to go along with the lake and this yacht club that Morse had envisioned for this potential mountain resort area, he also envisioned having a complete inn and spa to go along with this. So to fulfill his dream, Morse began construction on what is known as the Lake Lure Inn, which opened its doors to the public in 1927 and became pretty much a main attraction to the resort town that Morse hoped to create. And the town of Lake Lure was actually officially incorporated that same year after the Lake Lure Inn was opened. Unfortunately, the stock market crash a few short years later in 1929 and subsequent Great Depression that followed led to economic hardships for everyone, but particularly this area that he had kind of hoped to build up as this luxurious mountain resort. So while Lake Lure didn't exactly become this huge mountain getaway resort that Morse had envisioned, it still continued to thrive as a pretty popular vacation destination, housing guests ranging from U.S. presidents of Franklin Roosevelt and Calvin Coolidge to the cast of Dirty Dancing, which was actually filmed in that area.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest claim to fame and why a lot of people know of Lake Lure, because Dirty Dancing, very, very popular film, and it's a big destination area, and a big wedding destination area because of that.
Yeah, and from what I understand, the entire cast stayed at the Lake Lure Inn during the filming. So,
yeah, they behind the Lake Lure Inn, they've got the little suites essentially, and you've got the baby suite or the whatever,
all the character names.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah, that checks out. One other famous guest of the Lake Lure Inn is actually a reoccurring character here on the Ghost in the Mountains podcast, and that is F. Scott Fitzgerald.
This dude got around, bro.
Yeah, no joke.
You can't tell a story from any time in the early 1900s without that homie popping up.
I guess this is probably after he allegedly got kicked out of the GPI for firing off his gun. So
he's like, I'll go to another inn.
Yeah.
I don't need you guys.
I've got another inn and spa. So during World War II, the inn was actually commissioned by the United States Army, giving men serving in the war an opportunity to relax and recover from some of their wounds. And during this time, an estimated 5,000 combat airmen stayed at the inn in the 1940s.
Yeah, I think a couple of them actually just stayed there and built houses. And because I watched a video not too long ago about just some people that just fell in love with the place after staying there to recover.
I mean, that's understandable. You've seen some shit, and then you go into this nice little tranquil getaway town with the lake, and I could see you not wanting to leave after that.
Oh, I mean, I've definitely pondered retiring out that way myself.
For sure. Yeah, I think quite a few people have. And obviously that was the dream for Dr. Morse himself, was to build that area up and live the rest of his years there, which he did. Which kind of gets us into some of these reported ghostly sightings that have been seen around the Lake Lure Inn, specifically one involving Dr. Morse himself. So as I mentioned, Morse did end up succumbing to his tuberculosis in 1947, but some of the hotel staff and guests believe that he never really left the property. Various staff members have reported seeing or hearing Morse in the spa area, which is located in the basement of the inn. And some night shift workers have also reported seeing an apparition that resembles Morse standing near the fireplace in the dining room. And they're able to identify this because there is actually a portrait of Morse right across the hall from the dining room, to my understanding. So they're sitting here looking at the portrait of this guy, and then later in the night, they just happen to see this apparition that strongly resembles that portrait.
Dude, that would be pretty insane to
witness. Yeah, no joke. I think there's also been some stuff, I believe people might have reported smelling like cigar smoke, which I believe he was known for, which they kind of attributed to that being a remnant or a kind of artifact that Dr. Morse had kind of imprinted on the area, which, pretty interesting. This one definitely makes sense to me if this is kind of Dr. Morse's baby, this whole area, from Chimney Rock to the lake itself to the inn. So if a spirit was to pick a place to reside, I think it's safe to assume that Dr. Morse would have chose the inn itself.
Heaven can wait. I put a lot of money in this thing.
Yeah. I only got 20 years out of this.
Exactly.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, there's quite a few of these alleged spirit encounters that have happened on the inn itself. Dr. Morse kind of being one of the more infamous ones, being the founder of the inn. But I'd say the next most famous, if not the most infamous, is actually what is known as the Ghost of the Bride. And that is believed to be the spirit of a bride that was said to be murdered by her new husband while staying at the inn right after their wedding reception. So there are kind of varying accounts of the story. Some claim that the bride was discovered to be unfaithful, while others say that she was simply talking to or flirting with another man in the lobby. But either way, the situation escalated once the couple got to their honeymoon suite, which is actually a conjoined room, now split up into two separate rooms 217 and 218. But allegedly, the couple returned to the honeymoon suite, persisted to argue for a short amount of time, and unfortunately after that, the jealous groom ended up murdering his wife before taking his own life due to this encounter that she had.
That is a grisly scene.
Definitely is. Want to shy away from a ton of murder talk after last week, but this is definitely a big part of the story. So doesn't give lots of details onto what happened, just that she was killed and he took his own life after that. But after this incident happened, hotel staff have experienced pretty much a large amount of unexplained activity centered around these two rooms for years. Some have claimed to see an apparition of a lady in a somewhat old-fashioned white dress roaming or floating down the hall near these rooms. One employee who witnessed this immediately quit after witnessing this apparition. I mean, for something like that, for a reaction like that, you definitely want to put some credence into their experience, just knowing that they probably saw something they couldn't understand or explain, and it freaked them out.
I would not be staying around myself. That is insane.
Yeah, for sure. There's varying reports on this. Other staff have repeatedly reported the smell of roses coming from these rooms, which I think is kind of the belief that this couple was newly married. Their reception had just happened, so they'd probably been given all these bouquets and roses that were just kind of sitting around the room when the murder occurred. So,
it's always cigars and roses. You ever notice that? Maybe
those are some of the more predominant smells that you could pick up on. I don't know, but
I can't tell you how many hauntings I've heard of where there was a place in Gettysburg actually that I was listening to a podcast about, and same exact thing. You could smell roses and cigars. I'm like, maybe that's just the ghostly calling card.
Yeah.
Or just it's an easy prestidigitation for a ghost to just create, for whatever reason, those fragrances.
Yeah, maybe so. Who knows? There's been some other interesting reports specifically coming from these rooms. Pretty spooky ones. One of them was actually of a TV unexplainably turning on, even though it was unplugged. That one definitely stuck with me because I think that's something that would make the hairs on my arms raise up or just bolt out of there. One of the two.
Dude, yeah.
Or both.
Well, we might get to experience it firsthand.
Yeah. Maybe when we do our investigation, we book both these rooms, 217, 218.
That would probably
be
the way
to do it, right?
Probably so.
There are a few other just weird, unexplained reports. Bed sheets coming untucked shortly after making them, and just other weird things, items being moved around the room unexplainably. But that definitely seemed to be attributed back to this ghost of the bride, seeing as it came from that block of rooms. One of the more interesting occurrences in this is that, so we mentioned a few groups of paranormal investigators have stayed at the inn over the years doing their own investigations. And one group actually managed to record an EVP of what they claim is a bone-chilling chill scream that was heard in the room by basically all the investigators that were in the room and recorded on two of the EVP or devices recording for EVPs at the same time. So we actually have a little recording of that here that we could play for you.
Yeah. You all tell us what you think. Here is the Lake Lure Inn EVP.
That's strange. I think I'm do one base all the way. That's strange.
Now, supposedly that high-pitched squeal or squeak is what is said to be an alleged scream. Now, I personally, when I go into this sort of stuff, I'm typically kind of always trying to just look at what are the most rational explanations for things like this. I'm not trying to say that these people are making this up or this is fabricated, but I do think that there are sounds that are made in everyday life that could easily sound similar. I think that one shoe kind of squeaking on a floor could potentially make a squeak like that. I think a door could potentially make a squeak like that. I obviously don't know exactly what was happening in the room at the time that this was recorded, but I am just throwing it out there that it is certainly possible that this was a naturally made sound.
Definitely possible. I do think one of the more interesting aspects of this is this group allegedly came back to investigate the inn. I believe it was about a year later, and they claimed that they were able to capture a pretty similar EVP of that screaming type sensation on their next visit. So who knows? Maybe they just are wearing squeaky shoes all the time, but maybe they are capturing something that's a bit of an imprint there.
Yeah, you never know.
One of the other interesting investigations in this room was that of Celestial Piper posted a video of her staying in room 217 at the Lake Lure Inn on YouTube. And in this investigation, she's using what I would refer to as a cat ball, which is basically a little plastic cat toy that has red, blue lights in it, and it triggers on movement. So basically, it's just a little plastic toy that when your cat bats at it, it starts to light up. But I've seen some people use these in paranormal investigations just to leave in a still room and see if something is able to trigger that lighting reaction on its own. And from this video, from what I could tell, they are interacting, trying to communicate with the spirit, saying, if it's not too much trouble, could you please try to move this cat ball for us? And damn, within 15, 20 seconds, that little thing starts flashing. So I'm not super experienced using these in this form of investigation, but it's something that I think we should definitely experiment with in the future.
I agree. When you had shown me that video earlier, I personally had never really seen somebody using that method. And if that is something that a lot of people are doing, then, I've kind of been out of this stuff for a little while. I'm not as up on all of the newer methods, but I actually thought that was a really, really cool idea. And I also think that video is pretty interesting because, like you said, within seconds, the thing starts reacting. So I would definitely like to try to employ this method. What I do also want to try to do is have a bit of a control segment where we just see how easy it is to trigger these cat balls, as you call them.
There's probably a better name, but
Triggering Cat Balls Podcast. That's our next. That's our next one after Goats in the Mountains. But yeah, I would definitely like to see how easy it is for those things to go off in a setting in which we kind of feel like maybe a house that we don't feel is haunted, and just see how quickly they are to react, because I just think it's an interesting method. I think it's super cool. So we'll definitely be buying some cat balls before we roll over to the inn.
I'll get those purchased ASAP.
Nice.
So there's been a few other EVPs that have been captured. And let me go back here. If you're not familiar with the concept of EVP, our Smith McDowell House episode really breaks down that concept really well and gives you the full background of that. But just for the time being, EVP actually stands for electronic voice phenomenon, and that is what some of these people believe that they are capturing on these recording devices when they're investigating these areas. Some other experiences that investigators have come across at the Lake Lorraine have been EVPs that included the investigators' names being called or commands to stop or go away at certain parts of the inn. So I did think that was kind of interesting that it's not just room 217, 218 that are picking up some of these EVPs throughout the inn.
Yeah, and as we'll go into a little bit later, this name-calling stuff is synonymous with other accounts that have happened there at the inn, so it is kind of interesting that that's what they're picking up on the EVPs.
Yeah, definitely so. So, moving along, one of the other reported spirits of the Lake Lure Inn is that of a little boy. Some people have linked this back to an area known as the bottomless pools of Lake Lure, and I wasn't exactly able to find the exact location. I know that these are somewhere near the inn and somewhat a part of the lake off to the side. From what I understand, they're closed down to the public now, but they used to be kind of a pretty popular spot for tourists to go check out. But these pools were basically unusually deep potholes that were either believed to be created by erosion, where water found soft spots along the faults in the rock and eventually eroded it away. But other explanations include old lava tubes from long extinct volcanoes that have been filled with water during the creation of Lake Lure. But the gist of it is that no one's ever found the floor of these unusual formations. They're just these bottomless pools. And in 1985, a young boy tragically drowned after slipping and falling into one of these bottomless pools, which has been commonly attributed to an apparition of a young boy that is seen within the Lake Lure Inn. Some people have reported seeing this young boy bouncing a ball in the basement, and this has been reported multiple times by staff and guests alike. So it's a pretty common occurrence. As I said before, many people believe this to be the boy who drowned in the bottomless pools, but others believe that spirit could be attributed to another small boy who unfortunately and tragically drowned at the Lake Lure Beach, which is just across the road from the inn, and that occurred in year 2000. But either way, the most compelling part of this story occurred in 2010 when the inn's event and catering manager snapped a photo of an ice sculpture that he had created for a wedding in the dining room. And upon further examination of that photo, you could definitely see a short-statured apparition of a boy that appears in the background to the left side of the sculpture.
Now, a couple of things. I've seen a lot of alleged ghost photographs. This one's pretty good.
Yeah.
This one is definitely very strange. I was unaware of this photo until we started looking into this. I mean, if the person taking the picture did not claim to see anyone there when they took the picture, and then this shows up, I have to say that is pretty wild, especially when, again, you do have two pretty prominent drownings of children there on the property. To me, the theory of, just to go back real quick to the bottomless pools there, I'm actually very interested into where exactly that is, because I think I do know where those would be, but it does make a lot of sense that those would be the volcanic tubes that they're referring to, because if you look at the area around Lake Lure, I mean, the geological craziness that must have gone on to form that area, I mean, it makes total sense. That place was a molten hellscape at one point.
Yeah, and we talk about some of that being involved with the formation of Chimney Rock itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think that I would definitely like to investigate, learn a little bit more, and maybe even locate the bottomless pools, even if we are not technically allowed to go there, and at least like to know where they're located.
If it's illegal for us to check it out, me and Austin are definitely not going to go look at them, ever.
No, definitely not.
Going to.
Nope, not us.
But I've been, all over the area there. I've attended weddings at the inn there. They have a super, super awesome little hotel bar there with all these kind of older license plates and relics and a lot of stuff from like back in the day, a lot of vintage kind of interesting little accoutrements that they've decorated the place with. Even if you're just breezing through, that is just a killer spot. It's very chilling, I have to say, seeing that image there, because when you walk in that room, and I am not one of those people that even claims to feel like sensitive about these things. I've never seen like a full-bodied apparition necessarily or anything like that. But I will say, maybe it's just the feeling of being in this place that's very, very old. But man, I don't know. There's kind of a heaviness to it when you roll in there.
Yeah, for sure. I've never actually visited the inn myself, but
you're going
definitely looking forward to our trip.
Yeah, dude.
With, this multitude of spirits and entities that allegedly inhabit the inn. We've definitely got to check this out for ourselves. So there's actually another reportedly less friendly ghost who is often referred to as Sam. Can't quite figure out where the attribution of the name Sam comes from, but he is said to reside in the basement of the inn. Staff working in the basement have reported hearing him call their name in this low, gravelly voice, or just sometimes shouting, "Hey," at them. And some staff have claimed to just ignore this voice, go on, and if they chose to ignore it, some of them have had their hair pulled straight up shortly after in an attempt to grab their attention.
And we have some firsthand accounts of people that have experienced this and wrote about it on the internet, or at least talked about it, and then that has been referred to somebody else, then they've written about it. But I have to say, when we first started looking into this, those were some of the first stories that I heard, and there's a lot of people talking about experiencing that stuff, where I'm like, okay, a lot of people quitting the inn.
Yeah, I think staff, you kind of have to know what you're getting into to be able to work there, I feel like, because it's not just this one specific area. It seems to be a whole inn itself that has these paranormal occurrences going on throughout it. There have been other strange reports of portraits being moved throughout the inn, moved to different locations, and there's other things that I've seen about some of these rooms being chain locked from the inside, despite no one's being in the room themselves.
Oh, that's always fun.
Yeah, I'm sure that's great. Have to call the locksmith for that or whatever you have to do.
Yeah.
So, clearly Lake Lure and the Lake Lure Inn is quite a hotbed for these strange, unexplained, and paranormal activity.
Yeah, and I will just mention, I have a history of getting myself into weird situations, and I do have a story about ending up partying at a very strange place down there, and I can get into that whenever you...
Oh, let's go into it now. This is good timing.
Yeah, this is kind of part of the history, and when I say party, I mean, I was pretty young at the time. There wasn't like a lot of alcohol or anything involved. It was more just like hanging out with some people at a bonfire, but I ended up hanging out at this place that is very strange and historical, and when you walk in the door, you know that this is not just a typical, plantation style house.
Yeah.
I was friends with a guy who knew the people that lived down there, and I don't want to give away any names just so if they don't want to be talked about on the podcast or whatever, but it was a really eclectic scene. There were people playing bagpipes and Irish music, and we were sitting around this big bonfire, right down the hill is the lake, and that's when they're telling me about potential ghost stories in this place, and I unfortunately, I don't really remember any specifics, but I do remember hearing that this place was a bit haunted, and this house in question ends up being a place that's known as the Logan House or it's also known as the Pine Gables. And back in the day, for a little while, it kind of acted as the post office for a minute, which is kind of strange. But another weird synchronistic thing is that the author Frances Hodgson Burnett, who wrote the book The Secret Garden, actually stayed at the Pine Gables for a time, and I'm fairly certain she wrote either that book or I think it was that she wrote the play Esmeralda, which became the longest-running Broadway play in the 19th century. And she apparently wrote that while she was staying there in the Pine Gables in Lake Lure.
So Lake Lure influenced that play or her writing.
I think so. I mean, you can definitely see why it would if you ever end up in this historic house. But anyway, I just thought that was kind of weird that I end up, just going in. And when I was inside the house, I mean, there's trap doors and just strange stuff. It's kind of like a little tiny mini Biltmore house on the inside.
Oh, cool.
It's just a strange place. And I thought that was just kind of interesting that, the secret garden and stuff like that kind of came out of that.
Yeah, that is interesting. Speaking of these trap doors, I have seen alleged reports of there being some sort of tunnel system connected to the Lake Lure Inn itself, which supposedly connects to some local restaurant in the area. Caleb, you believe you think you know what that is, right?
Yeah, I believe it is a local Mexican restaurant that is in the corner of the shopping center right there. And my wife and my brother and we actually stayed down there right before Helene struck. And that restaurant was really, really awesome.
Nice.
I enjoyed it. But yeah, supposedly, if that is the restaurant in question, it'd be interesting to know, number one, why they put a tunnel under there and what that restaurant was back in the day, what that business was, what they were using that building for.
Exactly.
Because the little shopping center, it's walking distance from the inn itself, but they're kind of one and the same because they were supposed to be part of the same experience, essentially. So the architecture on the Lake Lure Inn and this shopping center, they're essentially very similar. They kind of made them have the same look to them.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, it almost makes you wonder, if that tunnel's there, maybe it's not the only one, and maybe there are other uses besides just getting to your favorite Mexican restaurant.
Yeah. Were they
quickly?
Were they smuggling moonshine back in the day? You never know.
Who knows? I mean, that could be a common thing.
Notorious speakeasy, the Lake Lure Inn.
Hey, that fits the era, so who knows?
Yeah.
So yeah, as we've touched on, there's just this weird hotbed of strange occurrences going on in the Lake Lure area itself. Some investigators have actually attributed to the area kind of being built on a fault line which contained various minerals, and they believe this creates somewhat of a magnetic field that emanates upward and provides energy to allow these spirits to manifest. Or maybe it's just a coincidence, but either way, the Lake Lure area is definitely ripe for further investigation. And one other area outside of the Lake Lure Inn that is also known to have its own ghostly residence is known as the Lake Lure Lodge. Caleb, do you know much about the Lake Lure Lodge, or did you know much about the Lake Lure Lodge before this?
Well, I didn't, but now I do.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, buddy, this one might be the most scary one of all.
Oh, especially if you're a fan of toilet paper.
I mean, who isn't? I'm a regular Charmin bear when it comes to the stuff. But who is the officer that the lodge was dedicated to?
His name was Officer George Penn. So this lodge on Lake Lure was initially built in the late 30s, and it was originally built on land acquired from the Morse family by the North Carolina Highway Patrol, and it served as a retreat for officers and their families who wanted to kind of get away. At the same time, it also served as a memorial for Officer George Penn, who was tragically shot and killed while on duty in 1937, and allegedly, he, like some of these others, never left the lodge. Many believe that the spirit of George Penn still haunts the lodge today, particularly room 4, where his apparition has been spotted walking around and vanishing through closed and sometimes locked doors. But it's not just the sightings. This ghost is known to have a bit of a mischievous side as well. One former innkeeper even described the entity as naughty. It said that he would frequently steal toilet paper from room 2, and puzzled guests would often come down to the front desk asking why the room doesn't have toilet paper, and the innkeeper would just kind of laugh it off and say, "Oh, George Penn must have taken it again."
You know, it's funny because I'd be interested to know if he was a prankster.
That's a good little look into there, because if so, that definitely kind of adds to the allure of the George Penn entity sticking around. Because, quite honestly, that could easily just be a case of housekeeping forgetting to refill the toilet paper and just turning it into a bit of a joke to play into this old urban legend.
But if that gives us any sort of insight into what eternity looks like, where there's not much else going on except for stealing the toilet paper and messing with people every once in a while, then I tell you what, friends, we're in for a boring time.
Well, I mean, you got to do what you got to do to stay entertained, I guess.
That's true. When you have all of infinite time.
Yeah, literally infinity. But the toilet paper isn't the only strange occurrence that people have reported. Other people have reported flower arrangements moving around on their own, lights flickering, and even a glass goblet being thrown across the room when someone dared to ask the ghost to do something. So if you ever stay at the lodge on Lake Lure, maybe keep some of these ghostly requests to yourself, or don't, if that's what you're looking for, because George Penn seems to have his way of making his presence known.
When we started talking about the idea of actually going to Lake Lure and doing a paranormal investigation, I certainly knew that there was some weirdness going on at the inn, but one thing that I have found that's just been pretty advantageous for us is the ghosts seem to be very reactive.
Yeah.
Like we have the video that you talked about earlier where this person asks the ghost to interact with this cat ball and almost instantaneously it does. And that's the thing, is like I don't ever want to go into a situation like that and provoke. We would obviously ask nicely, but a glass goblet being thrown across a room, I mean, that's a pretty massive poltergeist activity going on there.
For sure. And unfortunately, there's no video of that one because I would love to see that.
Yeah. But I think that not even knowing it, we picked a crazy good place to declare publicly that we were going to actually do a big investigation of.
Oh, for sure. I think this is a good place to test out the spirit box, if any.
Oh, yeah. We're going to do the Estes method, right?
Yep. Yeah, correct.
Cool.
I feel like that's the most, I don't want to say most legit, but at least the best way to remove most subjectivity from it, I would say.
When you described it to me, that to me felt like the best way to check it out. So I don't know. Maybe we'll try it a little bit the regular way, but I think I'm more interested in the Estes method.
Yeah, I agree. That's the way that Adriana and I have practiced using it in the past. So I think that is probably the easiest way to get what we're looking for while removing our own personal subjectivity.
Sure, yeah.
So another kind of very magical and mystical area of Lake Lure is known to also experience some paranormal activity, and that is known as the Flowering Bridge. And one of the most haunting tales is that of Clementine, who was a young woman whose spirit is said to still linger on the bridge, which was once known as Clementine's Bridge.
Now, real quick, that is the Greenway Bridge there.
Correct, where they had basically the gardens built on either side.
Did that bridge, I thought it got completely obliterated.
So that was the common thinking right after Helene, was that the bridge was completely wiped out. However, after they cleared a lot of this debris in the lake, they were actually able to find the structure itself still standing, had some structural damage, but that just shows you the amount of debris that was just flooded into Lake Lure. The fact that this bridge that sits, 155 feet up in the air was completely covered by debris.
Yeah.
And
that's crazy.
It took them weeks to kind of realize that, this thing didn't get knocked out. It was just buried under all this.
Well, number one, that's incredible news to know that thing withstood that amount of force, and man, they don't build them like they used to.
Yeah, no joke.
Damn, that's fantastic news.
Yeah, I'll touch on that here shortly a little bit.
The Greenway that was there was gorgeous. I mean, the community put in so much work and just making that a beautiful, just little, secret garden.
Yeah, that's kind of the synchronicity I thought too when you mentioned the author there.
Sure.
So kind of tying back to another tragic time involving the Flowering Bridge, or Clementine's Bridge, as it was known during this era, was during the 1960s. This woman named Clementine was water skiing on the lake when, unfortunately, she lost her balance and was hurled into the side of the bridge, where she tragically lost her life.
God.
Locals say that ever since then, her spirit has been tied to the spot, and the bridge was known by many as Clementine's Bridge. So the bridge itself was actually built in 1925 before the lake was actually flooded into or impounded, I guess, and it kind of became a local landmark. And eventually in 2010, a newer bridge was built to span Lake Lure. But instead of demolishing this old bridge, the town and community saw its potential and architectural beauty and decided to restore it. So by 2013, the old bridge had been transformed into something that was pretty magical and was known as the Flowering Bridge. It's an artfully crafted garden that stretched across the 155-foot structure, connecting to gardens on either side of the bridge, and it was filled with over 2,000 plant species that were able to survive thanks to the more temperate climate in the area as opposed to some of the other, more mountainous areas of western North Carolina. But even with the new life breathed into the bridge, some say that Clementine's spirit never left. Her haunting presence is still felt by many, especially those who visit this tranquil spot. And as we mentioned, bridge did sustain some structural damage during Hurricane Helene, but in spite of this devastation, volunteers remain dedicated to the mission of rebuilding the Flowering Bridge and recapturing its inspirational atmosphere that it was known for. So I think that's pretty inspiring there. With all the destruction that's happened, the community realized what a monument this bridge itself was, and they've committed to rebuilding, restoring, whatever they need to do to capture that same magical energy that it was once known for.
The entire community after Helene, they were essentially blocked off. Like so many communities were just completely blocked off down that way after the road was washed out from Helene. And that community showed how much grit they had. Just their dedication to building back Chimney Rock, to like bringing these landmarks back to life. And it's just so inspiring to see that community just coming back from just the horror that they experienced through that whole thing. And, talking about the unfortunate passing of the lady on the water skis, when you think about lakes, you're like, oh, it's just a very calm, placid environment. But they are, oddly enough, inherently very dangerous. Boats can be incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Boat motors. I have my boat certification license for operating a vehicle on Lake Lure.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Not super hard to do. You just essentially, if you're going to rent a boat down there, you have to do a little thing. You have to take a little test, essentially, and then you turn it into the licensee board or whoever down there. And it's good stuff to know. You have to know within 25 feet of land, you need to not be going this fast. It's pretty much universal boat etiquette and that kind of stuff. But it's incredibly good to know these things because you can just dive very quickly. And I think the next lake episode that we're probably going to do is probably Lake Lanier down there in Georgia.
Yep.
And man, I got to say, after the stuff I've seen about that place, I think it might top Lake Lure with the crazy stuff.
Yeah, you don't hear about having your ankles grabbed and pulled underwater at Lake Lure, which is comforting.
Yeah, makes me glad.
Yeah.
I've swam in Lake Lure quite a bit and never experienced that. However, yeah, that's pretty far up there for like nightmare fuel for me, because there's probably a term for it. I don't know if it's like a full-blown phobia for me, but I genuinely get really creeped out if I'm on water and I think there's something underneath me that I can't see.
Oh, yeah.
Super unsettling.
For sure. I think that's a common fear, especially in some of these murkier waters that you really don't know.
But, talking about lakes being very, very accident prone, Lake Lure is not a super huge lake. It's very oddly shaped. It's kind of like a cross, and it's got a lot of little inlets and strange little areas, but for the most part, it's not very big. However, Lake Lanier is sizably quite a bit bigger, and you want to talk about accidents on a lake.
Yeah.
Lake Lanier damn near wrote the book on it. It's just crazy how many fatalities have taken place because people were doing stuff on boats, but also like cars going off bridges. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure, I know very surface level information on Lake Lanier, which is basically from an episode of one Netflix series. But I'm sure as we dive into this and research it, we're going to find even crazier things than we could even imagine.
Oh, yeah. Well, as far as all of the stuff that we've talked about with the Lake Lure hauntings, would now be a good time to go into some of the posts.
Yeah, I think that's a great time.
So I just find with all of the reports of the paranormal stuff that has been talked about at Lake Lure, I think some of the more compelling evidence to me are some of the things that people have posted on the internet about, staying there or working there. One of the posts that I found, and I'll kind of have to paraphrase a few of these things because they might have been writing this in a little bit of a rush. There's a couple little things here. This was posted on TripAdvisor about the 1927 Lake Lure Inn and Spa, and the title is merely Haunted. So my daughter, 13, and I stayed here on a whim while visiting the area. I had never heard about the haunting, only the association with the movie Dirty Dancing. As we walked into the hotel to check in with my daughter, she immediately declared that the hotel was haunted. I dismissed her declaration and proceeded to check in. Our room was 222. As we walked to our room, we noticed the corner there was a placard on the wall that Patrick Swayze had stayed in the room during the filming of the movie. I felt the hairs on my arm raising as we turned the corner into our room. I knew nothing about the haunting, so I didn't think too much of it. Our room was nice and quiet, clean, pretty. My daughter tripped and fell to the floor as she walked around the bed and laughed that the bed reached out and grabbed her leg. We freshened up for dinner and left the hotel. When we returned, I decided to visit the gift shop adjacent to the check-in counter. My daughter grabbed my arm and pulled me to a framed newspaper article on the wall that had told the story of the hotel being haunted. I immediately went to the reservations counter and questioned about the legend. The attendant confirmed the legend and proceeded to relay the full story to us about a bride and a groom and also a little boy who had drowned in the lake nearby. She told us not to worry, the ghosts were very friendly and confined to only one side of the hotel, room 217. Well, that happened to be the same side as our room and very, very close to it. Now I was scared. After bribing my daughter and a half-hour reassurance speech from the hotel, we went to our room. Again, as we turned a corner, the hairs on my arm stood straight up. We locked ourselves in our room. My daughter felt very uneasy and wanted to sleep in the car. I began videoing her to help relieve the tension, and what happened next was too much to convince her to remain in the room. I have a video, but I can't upload it here. A plastic bag in her suitcase flew away while I videoed. I blamed it on the ceiling fan, but there was no ceiling fan. I blamed it on the air conditioner, but I couldn't replicate the movement, nor could I justify it after various attempts to replicate the distance and the speed that the bag moved. I have to admit, it was weird and spooky. Needless to say, we slept with the lights on and checked out early the next morning. I'll be back for sure. I'm fairly confident my daughter won't. Aside from all that, the hotel is beautiful yet eerie, but totally romantic. I'll be back.
Now, that is definitely a weird one, but this one is even stranger. What you're about to hear was posted to the website yourghoststories.com on January 26th of 2009. When I first started working at the inn, I felt a little uneasy. I felt like there were 1,000 eyes looking at you wherever you went. I was first made aware of the ghosts when I was working in the spa area. I was there late at night alone while cleaning and disinfecting the spa and washing the linens. I always saw shadows move down there. The spa was where I felt most scared when I was alone. Once, I was working the morning shift and was helping do the spa laundry. I walked through there alone carrying some linen. I heard my name being said by what sounded like a man with a low, gravelly voice. I dropped the linens and ran out of there as fast as I could. I ran into my supervisor's office, and she remarked that I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I told her I didn't see one, but one called my name. She thought it was funny, until something similar happened to her. My supervisor had a great many health problems, and she stayed in the bathroom a lot because her medicines made her nauseated. She said when she was in the bathroom, she heard someone say, "Are you okay?" She said she looked around, and no one else was in the bathroom with her. Many guests who have stayed there have reported that a woman would come into their rooms at night and either tuck them in or would stand there by the bed, smiling at them. Some of the guests have packed their bags and left during the middle of the night because of that. One housekeeper said that one Sunday morning, a lady walked by her wearing old-fashioned clothes, and the housekeeper asked if she needed anything. The lady replied, "No," and then floated down the hallway. That housekeeper quit, unfortunately. Other housekeepers have reported that glass would break while they were in their rooms cleaning, that a couple of TVs would turn themselves off and on at will, and the beds, which were freshly made, would have an imprint on them
as if someone had sat on the bed. There has been a rumor going around there for years that a lady was killed by her boyfriend or husband at the inn during the 1930s or 40s. She had bellied up to the bar there and was flirting with a patrolman. Her boyfriend or husband became jealous and enraged, so later, when they got to room 215, he killed her. Whether or not this is true, I'm not sure. I've done some research, but couldn't find anything to substantiate that claim. The night auditors have reported seeing a male figure in the dining room. He would be seen standing by the grand fireplace. They say that the ghost looks like Lucius Morse, because there's a painting of him in the lobby. They have also reported seeing a smoky-like fog descending from the grand staircase. There have been 2 ghost investigations done at the inn in recent years. They have reported to catch the EVPs of a woman screaming. The EVP in the spa telling one of the investigators to get out of there, and even called his name, like it did to me. There are some speculations that the antiques that the owner has brought in may have some ghosts attached to them. There may very well be more than 3 known ghosts that dwell within the ground of the 1927 Lake Lure Inn and Spa. If you are ever out visiting Asheville and the surrounding area, take a trip to the Lake Lure area.
Just ignore all this creepy shit I told you.
Yeah.
Be sure to go there.
Go check it out. Now, I will say, this is essentially a corroboration of a lot of things that have been reported there.
Yeah. I love that we have these firsthand accounts that basically go right along with these ghost stories that are attached to the inn.
And, I mean, dude, we got more than enough evidence to roll down there.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we've got specific things to look out for. You and I have never done an investigation before, but that's also something to keep in mind is like, we can't let what we know about this cloud our perception of what we potentially experience down there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's easy to do when you're attached to the information of a place like that.
Yeah. But at the same time, I do think it's good that we did this kind of deep dive research on it because we know the places to check.
Yeah. I don't think that you and I are the type where we're going to psych ourselves out into thinking we're experiencing something that we're not. We might get down there and we might not capture shit. In fact, I frankly expect that we're not going to capture anything. But we could strike gold in regards to, you know, some sort of actual paranormal occurrence that we are able to document. I'm excited about this, man. I tell you, like, after seeing all of the information and all of the different stories about the hauntings that go on there, this place is even richer with this than I really truly could have imagined. And it just makes me intensely excited to go check this out for ourselves.
For sure. I feel like if the Lake Lure Inn was like located in Asheville, this would be the prominent ghost story attached to the area, because there's so much more that happens here than, or reportedly happens here, than a lot of the other places that we've dove into in the city itself.
Dude, you're so incredibly right. I mean, you were spot on. If this thing were somewhere in the middle of town, dude, it would be #1 tourist destination. But I think it's even cooler that it's just far enough out.
Yeah.
It's tucked away in this beautiful, eerie, super cool area. Ah, man, the whole thing just makes me so stoked.
Same here. I think that, you know, not only the inn itself, just the area of Lake Lure and Chimney Rock itself is so ripe for investigation. We could spend, you know, a full weekend checking out various spots around this area.
Oh, well, that's going to be the plan, man. You know, we're going to stay at the inn, but legally, I will just say we definitely are not going to look for the bottomless pools at all. But I have to say that is an intriguing idea.
Agreed.
But we are going to keep you listeners posted about what we're going to be doing. And as we had kind of talked about on the last podcast, we are going to start including ads into the show, but we're also going to essentially create an opportunity for our listeners to have an ad-free version of the show via Patreon. And one of the things that we're also going to kind of do here and there as an added Patreon subscriber benefit is we're going to be putting some more behind the scenes, what we're doing here at Ghost of the Mountain stuff. I don't know how frequently we're going to be putting stuff up, so I'm just going to have that caveat there. But I do want to try to make an effort to, you know, be putting a little bit more inside information, a little bit more inside content on there. And I think that there's definitely going to be some stuff that we put maybe on our YouTube channel for everybody for free that is going to be part of our investigation of the Lake Lure Inn, because I plan to film everything.
Yeah.
I plan to film the entire time we're down there. We're going to be taking FLIR thermal imaging cameras, or an attachment that goes into your phone. So I will be running that thing as long as I can keep my phone battery alive while we're doing this. We are going to be doing EVP recording. We're going to be doing, like we talked about, the Spirit Box Estes method. We're going to be doing the cat balls. We're going to be throwing the cat balls at it. We're going to be throwing everything we possibly can. I might even see if the hotel will not throw us out for me creating an electrostatic charge in the room, and I might run a Wimshurst in there.
I know we talked about that. I really like that idea, just for the sake of trying to capture a little more on photographic record.
Yeah, why not? As long as it doesn't electrostatic the atmosphere and then the room catches on fire. That would not be good. We went to go find ghosts, burnt the place down.
We are the new ghost of Lake Lure.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I do want to be putting maybe some just unedited content, some like longer form stuff that we can throw on the Patreon for the subscribers. Because if you're going to be throwing any money at us at all, I want to make sure that everybody's, getting their money's worth, and also just feeling like they're part of the community that we're going to be trying to put together with our subscriber-based content. And we'll have some more information about what exactly we're doing with that going forward, but it will also be on our website, ghostsinthemountains.com, and we'll have explanations of how all that works on there. Otherwise, unless there's anything else you wanted to get into, Austin.
I think I'm good for the night.
Yeah, I think, man, I legitimately cannot tell you how excited I have felt the entire time we've been talking about this stuff. Because like I'd mentioned before, I knew that there was weird stuff that went on down there. I had no idea how much shit was happening.
And it's not just these ghostly spirit encounters that we mostly kind of primarily focused on today. Going back to the Chimney Rock episode, there's just some unexplained phenomenon going on in that area.
You ain't kidding, dude. And man, it just revs me up thinking about, we're going to go down there, we're going to check out this stuff, we're going to see what we can experience for ourselves, and I can't wait to share it all with everybody else, because we're going to do a follow-up episode once we've done that investigation, where it's going to be all about what we experienced and the whole 9 yards. So I hope everybody's really going to look forward to that one, because I sure as hell am.
Same here.
All right, Austin. Well, dude, thank you so much for your work on this. Thank you so much for your research. You're always bringing incredible stuff to the table, and I love doing this podcast with you, dude. I could not have done this without you, and I couldn't have found somebody that's more of a badass. I love it, dude.
Hey, I feel the same way, buddy.
I'm having a ball.
Same here, man.
You found the perfect dude to make fart jokes while you throw legitimate information out there.
Needed fart jokes.
And now I'm throwing out cat balls. Well, everybody, hold on to your cat balls, because next week's episode, well, it might even be spookier than this one. But either way, you have been listening to another episode of Ghosts in the Mountains, and we will catch you next week. Everybody, stay spooky.
Catch Caleb and Austin next week on the Triggering Cat Balls podcast.